Good morning, Americans. This is your favorite alien here on the morning of Thursday, November 23rd, 2022. And may you all have a good Thanksgiving day today. Not much to give thanks for, but anyway, enjoy the turkey and the football. Sure wish that you had a better turkey day today, but you know how things go. Well, today I wanted to be a special Paul Harvey celebration for Thanksgiving. It's a day to give thanks, whether we have to or not. And I wanted to tell you about a special Thanksgiving for me. Mine happened on November 28th, 1963. I was in Panama, about 12 miles outside the border of the Canal Zone in a city called Arahan. Very jungly. I mean, they hadn't built a road yet or anything there. I was 4.5 years old. The road was rickety to get to my grandfather's house. Sometimes you got stuck and you had to walk all the way down. Yeah, oh boy, the hill was bad. Anyway, my grandfather, Joseph A. Blackburn, was from Burtonsville, Maryland, and he was a farm boy. World War II veteran, Depression era values. So you understand how that was for those of you who are still alive that came from that time. You didn't talk a lot. You didn't like banks. And he was a tall man, too. He was 6'6", 260. He was huge, and he wasn't fat. He was just Paul Bunyan of a man. Whew. Yeah. But he instilled me with education and values that I came to appreciate. But that November day in 1963 is the first and only time where he actually did what most of you do in Thanksgiving. Give thanks. He would always say, "Thank you for the food and let's eat." And that was the extent of Thanksgiving. But something that year kind of got him. Whether it was Kennedy's assassination a few days earlier, I don't know. I was only 4.5, so I had no idea till about a decade later that when I asked him. And he said he just had a talk with the man upstairs. At least that's what he told me. But he was thinking about everything. He was hoping that the people would get more civilized and forget about their notions and values and think about themselves as a being. Sorry, Dad, they never have done that in the years that has passed. They've gotten worse. So I'm sorry to say on that respect, you kind of lost. And you kind of knew it because after he did his speech, about 37 days later, just like World War II, remember? When the Reuben James and 115 sailors died with the Reuben James on October 31st, 1941. 37 days later, you finally got in the war, but it wasn't you who declared it. It was Japan who declared war on you. Well, for my grandfather's aspiration of what he was looking for, it was shattered 37 days later. On January 9th, 1964, and most of you Americans don't realize this, But our two nations, Panama and the United States, were involved in a serious diplomatic breach that broke diplomatic relations for 9 months. And for 9 months, most Americans were persona non grata, if you know what that is. You had to stay in the canal zone, 50 miles long, 10 miles wide. You weren't allowed outside the borders of that territory because you controlled it. And my grandfather never understood why two measly flags killed over almost, or some people would say, 1,000 people. The Americans and Panamanians put a joint statement out when they finally got diplomatic relations 9.5 months later that only 22 people died. But really, Americans, 22 people. And this is something on this Thanksgiving you should give thanks for. And figure out why you are the way you are and why we were the way we were. We've changed in my country. You haven't. When you let two pieces of cloth like flags dictate that more than 1,000 people would die and get injured, and that you as Americans would put tanks at a border of a country that doesn't have the tanks to match you, and pointing them at the people, literally. Because you had one tank, I remember, in February 1964, when my grandfather had to report to the canal zone, and he had a truce flag he had to put on his car. And grandmother stayed home with my sister. She said she would be okay. But because my father was a naturalized American, boy, what a father, huh? Yeah, yeah. My grandfather took me back into the canal zone. And I remember looking out the car window and seeing these American tanks actually push the people across the border and pointing their machine guns and the tank barrel at them. There was disciplinary action done later on, and this is 1967, by the governor at the time, David S. Parker, who finally got those American soldiers that did it and reprimanded them severely. But the governor in time in 1964, heck, he had the same attitude that you had with the Japanese and the Indians. Those savages, as I remember him saying in one of his things, reporting to the American people on a television station. It was an army, as you would call them, AFRTS in those days. The local station was SCN. Yeah, and the governor who served from 60 to 64, he was not good. And Mr. Parker would come back, because he was acting governor. He would come back in 1971 as governor. And when I was in junior high school, I asked him, "You really meant in 1967 what you said?" And he said yes. And I told him then, if I ever get to Balboa High School, which I did a couple years later, and have some sort of influence in the student association, my main goal is to bury the hatchet that caused this, because it was two schools that caused this mess. Balboa High School, the American school, and the Institute in Panama. And I had discussions when I became class president of the sophomore class in 1975 with the president of the institute. And indirectly, because we couldn't do it directly. I mean, that would have caused a heck of a lot of commotion on both sides. Because it was 11 years after 1964. But we did send letters to both the governor of the Canal Zone at the time, Mr. Harold Parfit, and General Omar Torrijos, who ruled Panama. And in that letter, we both put regrets because our ancestors had started this on both sides of the border. And there was never any ill feelings between Americans and Panamanians in the 1970s. And that's what we both looked at it like, hey, look, the Zonians, which are the people that were there from the early 1900s, they seemed to think that this was a disaster that could have been avoided. And the Panamanians don't have any ill feelings, which was strange, because most countries you go there, you go to Colombia, they don't like you. You go to Costa Rica, they definitely don't like you. They put up with you, but they don't like you. But Panama, you got a lot of expats that are still there today and go there to retire. A lot of expats there. You go to Mexico, yeah. Every other country in Latin America, they don't like you for a reason. And I guess it's because of the Monroe Doctrine. One of those. Anyway, but when I talked to my grandfather last time I saw him alive, 2001, when he got hit by a car, I asked him about that Thanksgiving Day in '63. And he says, I may not see you again, but my hope is that we somehow get this over with. Our pettiness, our things that we belong to have this, that we are better than the other person, that we are superior, even though we may have better technology than other guys, and stop looking at people like savages. Well, today, on November 22nd, 2022, I can say to my grandfather, we're not even close, Dad. We're worse off than when you did this back in November 28th, 1963. Sitting in for Paul Harvey, this is your favorite alien on this Thanksgiving Day, saying to Mr. Harvey, if you can see my grandfather up there, you can tell him we're not even close. Good day.